Hello and welcome to the Craft Beer Corner. For today's beer review, we're jumping into a couple of flavored Imperial milk stouts. We have done beers from both of these brewers before, but these are two new beers to me, and very much looking forward to jumping into these. Well, really they both sound great, but one in particular. We're going to be starting with City Brewing's Batisserie Series S'mores Stout. S'mores is one of my absolute favorite desserts, period. And anytime I see a s'mores flavored beer, I grab it. So far, I've had one or two that kind of sort of taste like s'mores, but I've yet to have one that absolutely nails it. So if I see one, I grab it. And I'm thinking it's probably trickier to nail the flavor of s'mores in beer form, but brewers are trying and I keep grabbing them. So this one is 10%, as they both are. It's an Imperial milk stout. This one brewed with chocolate, vanilla, and lactose. Moving on to number two, this is Destination Unknown, or Dubco. Their Abuse of Stout. This is a cinnamon bun Imperial milk stout. 12% ABV on this one. They're based in Bayshore, New York, and this one's been brewed with honey, cinnamon, vanilla, lactose, and demerara sugar. So two beers, both flavored, both Imperial milk stouts. ABVs 2% apart. That's pretty statistically significant, but not too crazy. And they both sound like things that I absolutely want to try in beer form. Cinnamon bun and s'mores. So I can't wait to jump in. So we're going to do exactly that. Starting with City Brewing's Batisserie S'more Stout that clocks in at 10% ABV. Okay, so jumping into the first beer of today's Imperial Milk Stout review, we have got City Brewing's Batisserie S'mores Stout. Imperial Milk Stout, brewed with ingredients to taste like s'mores. So chocolate, vanilla, and lactose specifically in this one. 10% ABV on this. And City Brewing is based in Batavia, Illinois. It could be Batavia, I'm not sure. So if anybody does know definitively, please let me know down in the comments. I do want to get it right. Nonetheless, starting with label art. On this one, it's just a very classic clean design here. Batisserie series, s'mores, stout, looks quite nice, very clean. And it's kind of got a color scheme that goes with s'mores. It's got the kind of graham crackery light brown, black for the chocolate, and white for the marshmallow. So it's got the color scheme that's going with the flavor they're trying to impart. So let's get this cracked gently. All right, get this poured right in the old stout glass. Okay, as I'm pouring this one, I can tell you it's not pouring quite as dark or as thick as I would have anticipated, but it does seem pretty effervescent. Gonna back off a little bit, give that room for head to develop as I spill beer down the side of the can. Yeah, okay. So visually in the glass, it is very, very, very dark, but it is indeed not absolutely pitch black. It's close, but it's not quite. It's a very, very dark brown. I can see light coming through the bottom of the glass where it's a little thinner. In terms of the head, yeah, that formed a really nice creamy head here. Let's see, give it the old foam test. Yeah, that sticks to the finger for sure. So formed a very nice, tight, creamy head. Since it's a little lighter, it's a little easier to see. Looks like all the carbonation really went to work forming on the head, and I don't see much activity coming up on the sides here. So maybe this will have pretty decent retention. We'll see. Let's give it a sniff. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that smells quite nice. You can distinctly smell the vanilla and the chocolate in there. And I don't know if it's the vanilla that's kind of imparting an aroma that smells like marshmallow, because they don't state that they use marshmallows in the brewing process, nor graham crackers, obviously, the crust for the dessert. But the overall blend of flavors that's coming out of that glass really does actually put me in mind of s'mores. Just the aroma, it smells quite nice. In terms of pungency of aroma, it's stronger than average, but you do have to get a little closer to glass on this one than on the mini Imperial milk stouts. But smells great. Head is holding true, so let's jump right in. Ooh, Yeah, that's very nice. Very tasty beer indeed. Yeah, that's a very nice beer. Tastes very good. Overall, I like the flavor that I'm getting, but do I think that it tastes like s'mores? No, I don't. So there's that. If you're looking for s'mores in beer form, this, in my opinion, is not it. But it does taste very nice. There's no denying that. The flavors do work well together, and the balance of them, I think, is very nice. So in terms of what comes through, you definitely get the vanilla. That comes through very, very clearly. The chocolate comes through is far more of even sweeter than your average milk chocolate. It reminds me more of, say, Hershey syrup, kind of the sweetness of that. It's a very, very sweet chocolate flavor, and it's almost equal parts of vanilla and chocolate. They're blending together, so it's almost like chocolate and vanilla syrups mixed together like you would put in milk, but it's in beer form. I'm not really tasting anything in this that tastes like marshmallow to me, and certainly there is a noticeable absence of any kind of graham cracker flavor at all. So s'mores, I think not, but a very delicious milk stout any way you slice it, absolutely yes. It's very, very good. There is this underlying flavor in here. It's hard to put my finger on. There's an element of this that reminds me of like some porters. I've mentioned this in many different reviews. There are some porters that taste like there's this slightly peculiar flavor that's almost raisin-like, but it's not quite raisins. And I normally describe it as an off flavor. I've never been able to put my finger on exactly what I think it is or what the catalyst is for this flavor, but there is an element of that in this. Indeed, if this weren't so strongly flavored with the chocolate and vanilla and had that added lactose to really sweeten it up, which makes this big burst of that flavor side of the beer, I think this other underlying element would be far more prevalent. And it doesn't really go with what the other flavors are presenting itself in this beer. Overall, the beer tastes very nice, don't get me wrong, but there is a little peculiar flavor on the back end. It's not super present, but it's definitely there. You can detect it. I'm going to jump back in for body and mouthfeel. I got a decent sense on that first sip, but I want to make sure. Body on this one is not as heavy as you would expect. I would say it's a solid medium, not really even hovering on the medium-heavy range. For the mouthfeel, though, even though it didn't look that thick or viscous pouring it, once it's on the palate, there's a good bit of resistance here. There's definitely a good bit of resistance here, and it feels a lot more viscous than the body feels large. So there's a little bit of a disparity between the body and the mouthfeel. Frankly, I like that there's a little thicker mouthfeel to it because it helps balance out that lack of robustness from the body. And I don't mean it's light. It's not light. It's just not where you would expect a 10% Imperial to be. So that extra bit of resistance from the mouthfeel does help to balance it out a bit. In terms of the finish, this is one that has a reasonably long finish. It's certainly longer than your average Imperial milk stout, but it's not as long as many that I've had. What you're left with on the end of the finish is this lingering mix of chocolate and vanilla, and then there's that underlying flavor that I can't put my finger on. I suspect it's something with some specific type of malts, maybe something in the process where it comes through. It's not bad, but it doesn't quite fit right with the rest of the way that this beer tastes. So I don't know how best to describe it. You would almost have to taste it and decide for yourself. It's this, I don't know, it's a cross between a peculiar earthy flavor and like raisiny or prune-like. It's an interesting flavor to taste in a beer that's flavored like this. But overall, I do still like it. Longer than average finish to be certain. In terms of the balance, overall, yeah, for what they put in it, the balance is really, really great. There's a sweetness, but it's not overtly pungently sweet. It is on the sweeter side for an Imperial milk stout, but it's not as sweet as some. I don't find it off-putting. And the balance between the chocolate and the vanilla that's in here is spot on. Really, for me, seeing as that's all they put in here, yeah, the balance is great. But it just, to me, feels like it's missing elements. Definitely needs some marshmallow, and it definitely needs the graham cracker to tie it all together to make s'mores. But again, not, focusing on what they didn't do, focusing on what they did do, it came out very, very well indeed. Overall, a very tasty beer. Do I think it nailed s'mores in beer form? No, I don't. But for what they actually did brew, do I like it? Yeah, absolutely I do. I'm going to take my time, sip on this, come up with my scores. When we come back, we will get to the second beer of today's Imperial Milk Stout review. That is Destination Unknown's Abusive Stout, a cinnamon bun stout that clocks in at 12% ABV. Okay, now for the second beer of today's Imperial Milk Stout review, we've got Destination Unknown, or Dubco, and just to show you what I'm talking about on the sign, Destination Unknown Brewing Company, Dubco. This is called Abusive Power. It is a cinnamon bun flavored Imperial Milk Stout, 12% ABV on this one. They are based in Bayshore, New York. Now this one's been brewed with a blend of honey, cinnamon, vanilla, lactose, and demerara sugar. Demerara sugar, what is that exactly? Well, it's basically raw, almost like turbinado sugar made straight from sugar cane. It's unrefined, unprocessed, and it specifically is very large granule sugar. Even bigger than the grains of kosher salt. It's very large. And you can put it on top of baked goods, confections. It gives this really nice crunchy texture. It also really caramelizes very well. You could indeed use it to top a creme brulee, demerara sugar, because it's got such large granules and just crisp it, give a really nice, thick, crusty texture. So it's a very interesting type of sugar. First beer I've ever had with demerara in it, and I'm very much looking forward to jumping into this one. It sounds great. So, Abusive Stout. It has Lady Liberty weighing the scales of justice on the cover, so I kind of like that. A little kitschy, not Abusive Power, Abusive Stout. So, let's get this one cracked. Gently, gently, gently. That was reasonably gently. I sloshed some back on my hand. I'm always making a mess opening my beers. That's okay. We're going to get this poured right in the glass. Yeah, this one's quite a bit darker than the first. It's got a little bit more thickness, but I wouldn't say this is overtly thick as it's pouring. Give it a chance to form a head there. Have to clean that off or it'll drip all over my table, which is okay. Better my hands than my table. Okay. So first thing I can tell you is this beer has a significantly more pronounced aroma than the first one. Not that I'm making a direct comparison here, but it does. This beer is probably a foot and a half from my nose. I can smell it very clearly. I can smell the cinnamon and the sweetness of the beer. So let me get right up on it and see what I pick up. Oh yeah, cinnamon comes through very clearly. There's a definite sweetness. You can smell the grain, and it clearly has that lactose in there. You can smell that sweetness to the beer. And it's really a combination of cinnamon and the honey and the vanilla that's coming through most clearly. So it's the main kind of key ingredients. Demerara sugar, I'm sure I'm going to notice that in the base, but mixed with the lactose, perhaps not. That's just going to add some underlying sweetness, probably a bit more depth of flavor though. But smells very nice. It's got a pretty pungent aroma here. Let's jump right in. That head is settled. Ooh. Ooh. Oh, that's very nice. Wow. Okay. This one is not what I was expecting. It's a lot richer. It's a lot richer than I anticipated. It's much less sweet than your average milk stout, which for me personally, it depends on the beer. As a rule, I like less sweet, even in the form of a milk stout. I like sweetness to the point that it lets the additive ingredients really come through and speak and be able to be tasted. But the really astringently, pungently sweet ones, I will typically go for personally. Now, some it's absolutely called for, especially you have a bunch of bright fruit in it. Without a good hand of sweetness, it's just going to get lost and muddled in a malt bill, especially in something like a stout, where it's got these very deep roasty malts it can easily overpower specific additive ingredient flavors you're going for in, you know, a lactose added beer, in this case, a stout. So, first thing I can say, aside from the roasty malt bill that really clearly comes through, that cinnamon comes through absolutely clearly, as does the honey, as does the vanilla. And I got those flavors in that order when I started getting the flavors in it. The very first thing that I got was cinnamon, then it went to the malt bill, the roasty edge of the malt bill, then the honey came through, then the vanilla came through. As for the demerara sugar, is there anything I can say, oh wow, that tastes like demerara sugar? No, not really. But I like that they added it in there. It's a nice, interesting ingredient to go in tandem and pairing with the lactose, which is naturally going to sweeten it up. Now, in terms of how this malt bill interplays in this stout, I said it's not overtly sweet. There's a sweetness, and that sweetness is what is really letting the cinnamon, honey, and vanilla come through very clearly. And capturing the essence of a cinnamon bun, I think more or less they did do that. And one of the ways I think that they succeeded with that is instead of just making it an overtly sweet with the flavors that are in it, because they didn't put too much lactose in here, it's letting the background grain bill come through, which obviously grains are very related to flour and things with which you would make the actual base cinnamon bun. It's not just the cinnamon and the butter and the frosting and, you know, it's an actual baked good. So having this background of this malt bill really come through is kind of the added element. That's the base bun itself. And then it's got the cinnamon and the honey and the vanilla frosting, you know, kind of on top. And that's really what I'm picking up out of this. It's maybe not what the average drinker would anticipate, but I would argue that this is a far more clever way to do a beer like this, you know, calling the cinnamon bun beer with these ingredients, than to just really overload it with lactose and make it super, super sweet and just play on the topping side. I think letting the malt bill come through is a really smart play, and it's very, very enjoyable. I'm going to jump in for body and mouthfeel, think on this flavor development a bit more. Medium heavy body, very resistant, very viscous mouthfeel. It's maybe not quite as heavy in terms of the body as I anticipated for 12%, but the mouthfeel is very impressive. And it helps to kind of balance it. So it feels really, overall, between the two, between the body and mouthfeel, how they go in tandem, it feels appropriate for the ABV range. It's very nice. It's got a nice breadth to it. It's got a nice bit of resistance to it. In terms of what happens when you agitate around the palate, it doesn't get super silky creamy, but it does thicken up quite a bit. And it really coats these flavors all over the palate. The finish on this one is quite long. These are very big, bold, pungent flavors that are coming through in this beer. They used a heavy hand for them. Really the thing where they showed the most restraint was with the lactose. And again, I come back to that. I think it was a very smart play. As I'm sitting here thinking about the flavors lingering all over my palate, I can taste very clearly cinnamon, honey, and vanilla. And this malt bill really is, especially on the back end, adding this grainy quality to it that really is kind of adding that bun side to it. So I think that what they did here was really, really brilliant. I'm a big, big fan. In terms of the balance, honestly, I'm not sure I would tweak anything in here. Particularly the lactose. You know, it would be very easy to add more. Maybe it would appeal to a broader spectrum of palates. Maybe not. I don't know. That's not for me to decide. That's up to the brewer. But what I'm tasting and what they did with this, I think the restraint they showed with the lactose really did pay off in this beer in particular, because it just works. I can taste every additive ingredient in the base malt bill, and it's truly delicious. And yes, there's some sweetness, so these flavors come through clearly, but it's not what I would call a sweet beer. This one, to me, still tastes rich and roasty, and that for an Imperial Milk Stout is a home run. Folks, I'm going to take my time, sip on this, come up with my scores. When we come back, we will get both beers ranked from top to bottom. Okay, now that we've gotten to enjoy both beers, we're going to get them ranked, starting with the Energy City Brewing's Batisserie S'mores Stout, Imperial Milk Stout, 10% ABV. They are based in Batavia, Illinois, and this specific stout was brewed with both chocolate and vanilla and lactose. So starting with the aroma on this beer was fine. You could get a reasonable sense of what was going to be in the beer just by smelling it, but the aroma wasn't particularly pronounced. It was really just high end of average here. It gets a 6 out of 10. For the taste, overall, I did enjoy the taste of this beer. The reason I rated it where I did and not any higher is, frankly, it billed itself as a s'more stout, but it was missing just some flavor elements. Graham cracker notably, and sure, I understand the vanilla trying to take the place of marshmallow, but if you really want to make a s'more stout, you're already adding lactose. Just put the actual ingredients in it. The closest ones that I've tried, to coming to the s'mores ideal in beer form, have indeed used that exact formula. Not to say that one's any better than the other. I just think that it missed the mark a bit. But that being said, it was very, very tasty and certainly above average. It does get a 7 out of 10. For the body on this one was really just average for me. 10% on a big Imperial Stout. I did expect it to have a lot more breadth than it did, and it was just kind of middle of the road. Gets a 5 out of 10. The mouthfeel, on the other hand, was kind of what I was missing on the body side. They do go very hand in hand, and the mouthfeel had a lot of resistance. It had a lot of viscosity to it, and really helped to kind of make up the difference in the lack of breadth of the body. I give the mouthfeel a perfect 10 out of 10. For the finish, this beer had a pretty long finish. Stouts are one of those, they can be all over the board. Typically the flavored ones, the milk stouts, you're going to get a little bit of extra length just due to pungency of flavors. That did happen here. It was above average. It gets a 7 out of 10. For the head and retention, this one did a really great job poured at home. Honestly, it was really just shy of perfection for my money. Formed a really thick, creamy, lush head that really held its own almost the entire time I was drinking it. I gave it a 9 out of 10. For the appearance, now this one was not exactly pitch black, which I did expect. It was close, but it wasn't exactly pitch black. I docked 1 point here. It gets a 9 out of 10. For the balance, now taking in mind what I said about the whole s'mores thing on the front side, the balance of what they actually put in this beer was excellent. All of the flavors they did put in, you could taste very, very clearly, including the baseline malt bill upon which the beer was built. So for a balanced perspective of what they did with it, they nailed it. It gets a 10 out of 10. Feeling of the intangible. Subjectively, I liked the beer very much. Really for me, I was just craving all of the elements of s'mores. To make a s'mores beer without graham cracker in it, to me, I don't understand why you would do that, but I'm not judging. I'm just giving my own personal opinion. This is a subjective category, so I liked it, but it wasn't s'mores beer perfection for me. Still above average though, it gets a 7 out of 10. Finally, as an example of the style. Overall, the beer was very well done and it was very enjoyable, but it did miss the mark in a few categories, lost some pretty big points, and overall, it was above average, but it wasn't top tier for me. It gets a 7 out of 10, which brings the total score on Energy City Brewing's Batisserie S'mores Stout to a 77 out of 100. So it definitely is above average, no question about that. If you take into account what they did with it and how it came out, it was a very tasty stout. Just a few little tweaks that I would have made, but it absolutely was tasty. Moving on to beer number 2. This is Destination Unknown's Abusive Stout, the cinnamon bun variety, 12% ABV on this one. They're based in Bayshore, New York, and this one had added honey, cinnamon, vanilla, lactose, and demerara sugar. So quite a lot of very interesting ingredients to try to come up with that cinnamon bun flavor. Starting with the aroma on this one was absolutely huge. It was one of those you could smell from several feet away. It does get a perfect 10 out of 10. For the taste on this beer was very, very nice. Very, very nice indeed. Overall, the additives that they put in really did come through in the beer, and I thought that this would be an easy one to oversweeten making a cinnamon bun beer, but they kind of let the malt bill play the part of the bun. So there wasn't as much lactose added, so it didn't overly sweeten it up, so you could actually taste the malt bill, get the baked good side, but still make all the additives come through. Frankly, I thought it was a really clever move, and I enjoyed what I tasted. It gets a 9 out of 10. For the body, This was a big body on a big beer. It was certainly above average. It gets an 8 out of 10 here. For the mouthfeel was incredibly resistant, incredibly viscous, and it did get a nice thickening creaminess when you agitate it around the palate. I wouldn't have changed a thing there. It gets a 10 out of 10. For the finish, yet again, this was another one that had a very long finish. This was well above average. This was almost top tier for me. The flavors really did linger, and it was particularly, surprisingly for my money, the malt bill that lingered the longest of all, which personally I really appreciated. It gets a 9 out of 10 here. For the head and retention, this one did a pretty good job. Honestly, it was above average. It wasn't quite as spectacular as on the first one, but for port at home, did a great job. It gets a 7 out of 10. For the appearance, this was what I anticipated, pitch black. It gets a perfect 10 out of 10. For the balance in this beer was exceptional. All of those myriad ingredients that they threw in, you could really taste all of them independently. Okay, perhaps you could make an argument that demerara sugar, trying to pick that out versus, you know, the lactose sweetness being brought in. Sure, fine, okay. But for my money, they got the essence of cinnamon bun, and the way that they did it was really clever. I think they kind of took the path less traveled, and I think it paid off. I gave the balance a perfect 10 out of 10. Feeling in the intangible. Subjectively, I really enjoyed this beer. I really did. Just a few little things in here overall across a few categories that I would have liked a little more of. Just a little more robust body in this ABV range, and maybe just a minor tweak on some of the flavors and the balance of it. Even though I did give it a perfect balance, subjectively for me, I would have tweaked a few things. But overall, I really enjoyed it. I gave it a 9 out of 10. Finally, is an example of the style. This beer did very well across most categories, only lost a few points in a few categories, but a very well done flavored Imperial milk stout. Really delicious, and it really was a very good representative of a cinnamon bun in beer form. I give it a 9 out of 10, which brings the total score on Destination Unknown's Abusive Stout Cinnamon Bun Flavor Beer to a 91 out of 100, so yet again, well above average. Both of these beers were distinctly different, but they just go to show how vast and varied the world of Imperial milk stouts are. I mean, if you can dream it, you can try to make it in beer form, and that's half the fun of drinking them. These both I would recommend. If you're a fan of s'mores, you're a fan of cinnamon buns, these are two I would put on the list. Folks, that's today's review. As always, I do sincerely appreciate you tuning in today. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you want to stay in the loop on our videos go live to YouTube, you can click the notification bell icon. It's right next to the subscribe button. Until next time, keep it beer, keep it craft. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.